I'd like to begin with a poem that was given to me by a friend. It's called The Way It Is. It's written by William Stafford. There is a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. My friend Jeffrey Ford shared that poem with me, and it was especially poignant because we were in the Grand Canyon on the trip that Diane just alluded to, and it was just a magical moment for me, and I've held on to that poem throughout my life since then. And this community of ETC is more than just outdoor activities. It's a community that talks to my life through experiences and adventure and art and my mind. And I think this poem and the way it's stayed with me is a good example of that. But I'd like to start by sharing some photos with you of who I am and who I was before my injury. This is from the summit of Mount Baker in the North Cascades of Washington. This is me at my first day of mountaineering class. Look how white my gloves are. I don't know how to use any of the things attached to my body, but there I am, excited for the first day. This is Mount Hood, the first volcano that I got to climb with some good friends a few weeks later. I went to India. One of my graduate assistants in college, he was my teacher, invited me to come join him in India after we both graduated from school. This is Mount Baker from the distance. I used to do a lot of backcountry skiing and ski touring. This is from the summit of Mount Shuckson. This was the scariest thing I ever skied. This was definitely a high pucker factor. This is called the Black Hole Couloir in the North Cascades on Bandit Peak. It's just incredible. Imagine, we were skiing 2 feet of powder through that. It was like really amazing. And this is what it looks like when you're camping, when you're backcountry skiing. We set up our skis so they don't freeze in the snow, and this is actually like a very happy place for me. It looks challenging, but it's really fun. This is climbing something on Mount Stewart called the Ice Cliff Glacier. It's kind of one of the old alpine ice standards in the area. And I also like to go rafting. And this was the 4th of July trip. We had our American flag. There's a whole bunch of friends from Seattle that we wanted to go on a trip. And then this was a hike I took in November 2014. That's Mount Adams in the distance. It was a cold autumn day, and it was just, everything about it felt like winter was just on you smell. You know that smell of this fresh snow. It was all there. The change in the season was heavy on my mind. And I love adventure, and I love moving my body and challenging myself. I like to be afraid because it helps me grow. And I'd like you all to close your eyes for a second and imagine that you're children again. And think about something that just gave you a sense of overwhelming awe. For me, it was standing 10 feet from a train as it blared its horn and flattened a penny into a perfect little oval. And it was just that sense of oh my God, that sense of awe. I try to cultivate that sense of awe wherever I can find it as an adult, and these types of adventures did it for me. I didn't even have to work for it because it was just everywhere. But I think it's a really important part of life. So this sentence is made of lead. On December 3rd, 2014, I fell 35 feet and broke my back. I was ice climbing with my friend Kel. One minute I was hanging from our rope, and the next minute I was falling. I looked over my shoulder and I could see the ground below me. And the next thing I remember is I woke up and I was looking up and I could see Kel, and I said, "Did I fall? Were we climbing?" And he answered me. And then I said, "Did I fall? Were we climbing?" And I asked him probably 5 or 10 times. And then this moment of lucidity swept over me, and I knew what had happened, and I knew where I was, and I knew I couldn't feel my legs. And I knew what that meant. So Kel placed a pad under my body to help insulate me from the ice. He gave me his jacket, and he said, "I'm going for help," and then he was gone. It was December, it was 3:30 in the afternoon, we were in the Cascades, the sun was starting to set. And as I lay there, I fought to bring my breathing under control. My back hurt terribly, and I knew I was in trouble. I watched the colors of the sky change, and I watched the moon come out, and I started getting really cold. I was afraid, but I didn't think I was going to die. I was holding on to the same thread that I've held on to throughout my life. I knew that the Seattle Mountain Rescue Team would be coming. I knew my friend had gone for help. I knew the people on that team. I trusted them. But I was alone. I couldn't move. I was getting colder by the minute. I had no food or water or a headlamp, just my jacket and my helmet and the rope that was still tied to me. I knew that all I could do to help myself was to stay awake. Several hours in, I heard the thump, thump, thump of a helicopter circling the valley, and I watched it fly slowly by, and my heart kind of leapt. I said, maybe this helicopter is here for me. And then I thought of all the helicopters that had ever flown by and that were not for me. And I continued waiting. Watching the moon, I knew at least another hour had passed. I was shaking steadily with the cold, and my teeth were slamming into each other. I was having a harder time staying awake. And then I began to hear voices. I didn't know if they were in my head or if they were real. My pulse quickened, and I started hearing voices and seeing lights in the woods, and I started shouting. I started calling for help. And then I could see there were lights down there. There were people walking by below me, and I kept yelling, and I could hear them yelling, but they couldn't hear me. And it was like, the worst part of Gilligan's Island in your own real life. All of a sudden, it got quiet. They stopped yelling, and then I yelled, and then I saw all the lights swing towards me. And at this point in my story, I always get chills, and I also feel this urge to cry for a second, because right after that moment, someone shouted my name, and all I could say back was help. I didn't say, yes, it's me. I said, help. My name is Help. I just needed other people. But they were incredible. Soon I was in a helicopter flying to the hospital. The flight nurse looked like an alien with this giant helmet on, and everything inside the helicopter was red. And I couldn't talk to anyone. I felt very alone, even though they were around me. And they put warm bags of water on me and blankets, and we rode to the hospital. 20 minutes later, we arrived at Harborview Medical Center, and an organized scene of chaos began. This process of compassion and indifference and pain and soothing ensued, and a new chapter in my life began. And in that moment, I clung to the thread. That was 3.5 years ago. That story was made of lead. Alchemy is the process of turning lead into gold. And I don't claim to hold any gold in my life, but I believe in the process of alchemy. Fast forward 6 months. This was the day of my injury. I fell from roughly where my partner is in this picture. This is where it happened. But fast forward 6 months, and I'm at a swanky hotel in Park City, and I'm at the No Barriers Foundation Annual Summit. And while I was there, downhill mountain biking and whitewater kayaking, I was introduced to these adaptive sports organizations all over the country, and there are many of them that do incredible work. And I met this woman, Diane Pozlowski. Can we give her a round of applause? And Diane said, "Josh, have you ever wanted to float down the Grand Canyon?" And I said, "Yes. That's been my dream for my whole life. Don't give away my spot. I'm in. I want to do this." She's like, "It's not until next year." And I was like, "Yes." I'm in 100%. And 6 months later, I moved out of my apartment in Seattle into a van, which you can see here. And I decided I wanted to spend the winter learning how to monoski. And so I drove all over the western United States, going to different adaptive sports programs, learning how to ski. And then that summer, like magic, I found myself, whoops, that's when I was skiing. And then that summer, like magic, I found myself floating down the Grand Canyon with Diane and my father and many new friends, many of whom are here tonight, John Greer and Dave Patton. I know you guys are out there, and Elena, like, there's lots of... lots of those friends are here. And that trip was an adventure with my dad that I've been dreaming about since I was a child, and he was a busy professional, and that is the power of ETC, and that is alchemy. And I want to read something. My father sent me an email last night, and he said, he heard that I was doing this talk, and he said, imagine the delight of sharing a 15-day adventure rafting the Colorado River with your child. Further imagine the pride you can have watching him expertly handle the challenges of the trip, and the pride you feel when he partakes in meaningful and thoughtful conversations with everyone there. And then imagine the additional exhilaration you feel when you find you are up to the physical challenges of rafting and paddling lava falls. Wow, words can hardly convey the experience and its full meaning. Dad. So that was a trip I got to share with my father and ETC, and fulfill a own personal dream of mine, even before my injury. And, you know, not long after that trip, I started working again, and I bought a home in Bend, Oregon, and I began to feel less like a person whose story was made of lead. Things started making more sense. This is me floating down the Grand Canyon, and our camp. There's Justin Solomon, who's just a phenomenal trip leader. I know lots of you know him. Yeah. There's me and my father on the Grand Canyon. And I love this picture. I think this speaks volumes about ETC. It's art, it's beauty, it's overcoming challenges, it's expression of the soul. This is beautiful. Was it Kelly? Kelly. And then this is a fun story. This isn't in my script, but I'm going to tell it real quick. Lava Falls is the biggest, scariest rapid on the Grand Canyon, for those who do not know. And as we were approaching it, it was raining, and there was thunder, and it was terrifying. It was like all the ominous signs of, like, you should not be doing this were there. But our guides had done it a million times, like, oh, don't worry about it. And we go down Lava Falls, and everybody made it, clean lines, and nobody flipped and nobody swam. And we got to Tequila Beach, is what you can see here. And it's kind of hard to see in the photograph, but there was a double rainbow over Lava Falls after we got done, which, read into it whatever you will. Pretty fantastic. So, about a year after that, I found myself in Baja del Sur in Mexico, watching one of the most spectacular sunsets in my life with Diane. And she wouldn't stop taking pictures of me or the sun, but it did little to diminish the beauty of the moment. And this is from that. And on that trip was another person I love. His name's Turner Pitkin. Turner and I were roommates in Seattle before my injury. I'd only lived with him for maybe 5 months before all this happened, but he has one of the most infectious laughs you've ever heard in the whole world. And he was days from moving out of our home to go back to Virginia to be with the woman who's now his wife, which is beautiful, but we were sad that he was leaving. And it was right after that I fell and was injured. And on the spot, Turner said, I'm not going home until after Christmas. And he stayed in the house. My parents moved into my old room while I was in the hospital. And Turner cared for my parents while they were caring for me. And he came to visit me in the hospital every night after everybody left. And we played cards and we laughed. And that guy is a mighty strong thread. You know, it's a really powerful example of the types of experiences that I think ETC facilitates. And and that means so much to me. And the thread that I hold on to in this world are the relationships that help me realize my potential. Diane is a thread. Turner is a thread. My father is a thread. And all of the ETC volunteers and participants and donors and people who consider themselves part of this community are all powerful threads that people hold on to in their lives, invisible threads that they rely on to be everything that they can be. And I didn't make this transition in my life alone. After my injury, I was incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by friends and family and colleagues and spinal cord injury mentors, people who were 15, 20 years into their experiences and living full lives and chasing their dreams. And even with all that support, my opportunities with ETC meant the world to me. And I can't help but think of the people who are dealing with life changes without that type of support. And the people who are born with bodies who are different than their peers, who grow up in a world that tells them that they are different and they have to be careful. That activities that might thrill them and awaken their sense of awe are not safe for them. ETC fills that gap. ETC helps people of all bodies and ages, of all economic and social backgrounds, to see what they are capable of and help them realize their potential. That is why this is so important. This is about changing people's lives and helping people who might see themselves as broken to realize their magnificence. That's why we are all here, to celebrate what this organization does. You may not have realized that by being here tonight, you are all participating in the art of alchemy. You are showing people that despite their challenges, despite the lead that weighs them down, life is pure gold. Thank you.